welcome to Satsang. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Good to be here. Good to be here. I see some people already joining nice and quickly. Like it. Let me get my chat up here, make sure I look like something. Oh, good. The frame is nice. I can actually move it back a hair this way. There we go. Excellent, excellent. Wooter, hi. Hi, Wooter. Good to have you. Starlight Glimmer, hello. Welcome, everybody. And yes, it is that time. Taking advantage of the opportunity on a Sunday noon, Sunday morning, Sunday evening or night, to focus the attention inward. Attention is a really interesting thing. A really interesting thing. Our attention, what we give focus to, is kind of like a flashlight in a dark room. Right? There's a lot of stuff out there, but we only see this much of it, whatever's in the flashlight. Although our capacity for seeing is wherever you shine it, it's going to be seen. For most people, their idea of what consciousness or awareness is that focus of attention. Only what's immediately in the light of attention do we regard as being conscious. This is my consciousness. And it's not so. Consciousness is the room. It's everything that can be illuminated. Whereas the attention is simply what we happen to be focused on in the moment. But notice that no matter where you focus, there's something there that cognizes what is being focused on. We don't pay enough attention to what attention is reporting to. What it is that's monitoring and cognizing everything that attention gets focused on and therefore brings into its limited sphere of light. In non-duality, what we do is we defocus attention, so it's no longer a flashlight. It becomes like floodlights. It's a lot like when you defocus your eyes, like you're looking at a horizon or some really beautiful large vista, and you defocus your eyes so that you could take in the entire scene, including your peripheral vision. That focus of attention moves backwards a step to take in the whole picture. But what we're trying to do in this case, it's very similar, but as we're defocusing, instead, we are attempting to turn around and see the source of attention, to see that which attention is reporting to. That, of course, is you. Now, you can't really do it because if you could bring yourself into focus of attention, it would mean that you were something different from the attention, and then you'd have to ask, well, who is it that is seeing this object now that I've called myself? This, in fact, is what we do. This is the nature of the mistake of the sense of a separate self that happens. It becomes a sense, an image in the mind that we mistake ourselves for. But any image, anything that can be perceived, is being perceived by something else. And you can perceive anything except yourself. So what is the source of attention? And this is the kind of objectless meditation that I recommend to people. To simply, when attention completely withdraws, you can't see yourself. You can just feel, sense yourself. You just know that you are. I mean, if I ask you if you are, is anybody here going to say no? Right? And of course, you are aware that you are. And if you existed and there was no awareness of it, that's actually like division by zero. It's an inconceivable postulate. It's a mind game that everybody plays, that I could exist without knowing that I exist. But just try it. Just try experimenting with yourself, pondering that, and you'll find that it's absolutely impossible. That existence and the awareness of existence must be the same thing. So attention is a focus of awareness. Awareness simply closing down the aperture and only seeing a particular subset of everything. So, and isn't that you? So if your awareness of existence and existence become one, then the only conclusion we can draw is that you are awareness. That's what you are. And isn't that the primary experience of everyone? Isn't knowing, awareness, awaring, isn't that our primary experience? Without that knowing, without awareness, would there be any experience at all? So our primary experience, the fundamental thing that we all experience, is conscious awareness. To me, it's conclusive that that's the only thing that qualifies for the term I. Not a bunch of functions, not a bunch of piece parts, not a body, not even thoughts in the mind or feelings, but that which cognizes them. And obviously it is awareness that cognizes, and it's you that cognizes. So you and awareness are the same thing. Awareness is not an attribute of you, it is what you are. And the whole mistake we have made that has caused humanity to suffer interminably is mistaking what we are aware of for who we are, rather than that which is aware as being who we are. But when you just look at it for a second, isn't it self-evident? That which is aware of the content is what I am? Isn't that the position that you're actually sitting in? So just ponder that as we go through this satsang. Every time, just whenever you think of it, remember, no matter what's going on, no matter what's happening on the screen, no matter what I'm saying, no matter what anybody is typing into chat, no matter what questions or ideas are coming to your own mind, notice that simultaneously you are aware of them. And while the content is changing constantly, the awareness of them, notice, never changes at all. This is the timeless. This is the birthless and deathless. So, welcome again, my lovely friends, to Satsang. Wooster says, hi G, hi Wooster. October Paul says, much love from Portland, Maine. Dale Wiggins, great to see you again, GP. Billy Boy, many hugs, GP, we love you. And of course, these satsangs. Thank you, Billy Boy. Ava from Poland, namaste. Day G and everybody, much greetings from Poland. John Watson, hi from Glasgow. Liza with a lot of Z's, hello from the East Coast. Dave Rose from Massachusetts. Ursula from Madeira Island in Portugal. Carrie, namaste. To all, Anja, love from Germany. Hi, Anja. Jane, do you mean just be the observer as awareness? Great question. The coming to think of ourselves as the observer. This is good. my own little concoction of tea. Coming to think of ourselves as the observer is a good step, but it's not the final step. Because when we think of ourselves as the observer, notice there's a tendency to still think of yourself as a form, as the observer, right? The confusion, I think I want to make a video about this. The confusion is nouns. In language, we use nouns. We call this a pillow, this a head, right? This a shirt and the like. And so when I say observer, on a very unconscious level, you are turning yourself into a thing. More accurately to say, you are the observing. That's why the word knowing is a great word to use, synonymous with consciousness or awareness, because consciousness and awareness are both nouns. And so I've discovered that it's kind of confusing. People still think of awareness as a thing, right? So sometimes you'll hear me say awaring, right? Which is not a word, because we just think of it as the noun, but that's what it is, right? I mean, there's no such thing as a mind. There's only thoughts or thinking. There's no such thing as a wind. There's only air moving, right? The moment we give it a name like that, it becomes a thing. And that's the problem with seeing myself as the witness or as the observer. It's not that it's inaccurate, because of course the ultimate witness, the ultimate observer is awareness. It is what is aware. But the danger is that on a very subtle level, we start thinking of awareness or consciousness or as ourselves as some kind of thing. And if that's the case, then awareness or consciousness becomes an attribute of that thing. There is no thing. There is only awareness. There's only the observing. Now just check this out for yourself. Is there ever a moment when there's not observing happening? Now, if you look really closely, there's observing. It's obvious, isn't it? The awaring is self-evident. But where's the observer? Where's the witness? Look, you can't find it. The ing words are far more close to the truth than the nouns, like awareness and consciousness. So observing, witnessing, knowing, awareing are accurate. And that's the only distinction I want to make. As a concession to the sense of a separate self, to move from being completely identified and engaged with what I am, with the content of consciousness, with what I am witnessing, we take a step back to see that you're obviously the witness of that. The next step, which is close to the final step, is to see that there's nobody who is witnessing. There is only witnessing. And now that sense of me as the witness becomes formless. It is not an attribute of a thing. There is no thing. There is only this witnessing. You can't even refer to it as like an action, because there's nothing taking the action. There's nothing witnessing. There's no thing witnessing. The witnessing or the observing is the final step. That's the place. The ultimate witness is formless. The ultimate witness is witnessing. It's meant by Satchidananda. Being and consciousness, being and knowing are one. The knowing is your actual being. Formless, timeless, birthless, deathless. How's that, Jane? Does that clarify it precisely? It's such an important thing, and I want to make sure it's clear. In some instances, talking to some people, and I know you're more advanced, so I can give you that. And other people, I would just bring them, excuse me, bring them to the point of the witness and leave it at that. Because it's enough. Because that's the first step of disidentification, getting to see that myself, who is experiencing and observing all my everyday life, all the stuff, right, is not the same as what I'm observing. That sense of identification begins to withdraw back into a more fundamental, a more primordial place. Okay. But there still remains this sense of being something, right? And it exists on all planes. It exists as thoughts, it exists as emotions, and it exists as sensations and as perceptions as well. So that belief of the separate self is active in many different aspects of the human being. What we're doing is we're kind of whittling it down until there's absolutely nothing left but pure beingness, or being. So, thank you, Jane. Love from Denmark, Daniel Burr. Hi, Daniel. My spiritual revolutionary, Sean. Hi, Sean. He's in Scotland. John, I have a strong resistance to experience painful feelings or thought. How do I increase willingness to experience pain? Oh, wow. Boy, there's so many different ways to approach this. Start first with just the feeling of the strong resistance to it. Now, mind you, nobody purposely inflicts suffering on themselves. Okay? Even somebody who hurts themselves, cuts themselves, or something like that, is simply seeking relief from a more extreme suffering. Right? And the temporary pain of cutting your body, which is intense and very focused, actually blots out a worse emotional pain that's chronic. So nobody ever seeks out suffering. They never seek to inflict hurt on themselves. The body doesn't do that. The body isn't trying to do that. It was made to move away from pain and towards pleasure. Pain meaning danger, possibly death. So the nervous system is much more sensitive to danger or negative stuff in the environment than it is to opportunity or positive things in the environment. It's just the way it works, because it's more important. It's okay if you miss an opportunity. It's not okay if you miss a danger it's lights out. Right. So first off, recognize that it's not something you can or want to get rid of, right? Now, secondarily, the moment you have that feeling of wanting to get rid of anything, you actually create a conflict. That conflict makes the nervous system hold on more tightly to the resistance, because it now feels threatened. From the nervous system's point of view, its resistance is sensible, right? It's resisting because it doesn't want to feel the pain, right? So it thinks if it lets go of the pain, it's going to let go of the resistance. It's going to experience the pain. It's not true, but it's a state that the nervous system can get stuck in, and of course, it applies to painful thoughts, painful emotions, and painful sensations. It applies all around the board. Now, there's also wisdom in the fact that it doesn't want to feel that pain, because its capacity to basically repress emotional pain is the traumas that happen to all of us as children. And so the nervous system And a trauma is simply a state of danger or vulnerability that you can't get out of, right? And so you can't run and you can't fight, right? So the nervous system has none of the tools it normally has for dealing with a danger. The third tool it uses is freeze, which it takes that energy and it suppresses it. It sticks it way down somewhere in the body, somewhere in the nervous system, and then builds layers of behaviors and beliefs to keep that pain at bay. And of course, part of the spiritual journey is back towards that, releasing that, not as an abreaction, not as a re-experiencing of the trauma. It's far more gentle. It lets it go because it takes love to make that happen. But nonetheless, that's in the nutshell is the mechanism. So trying up here on this conscious level, I have a lot of resistance to it. Trying to fight it is a waste of time. Now, notice that there's a feeling of wanting to resist, and then there's a thought. And here's your thought. It says, I have a strong resistance to experiencing painful feelings. Now, the feeling of resistance and that thought are not the same. The feeling of resistance was there. And one of the ways in which it tries to sustain itself is by creating thoughts like, I have this terrible resistance to it. I don't want to go there. It will overwhelm me. None of it's true. All of those are the smoke screen the nervous system is throwing up there in order to get you, to keep you from looking at what the pain really is. Now, if you understand that, it becomes far easier to start to turn towards that pain. And we all have it, right? And the pains that we experience when we are too young or immature to intelligently or wisely deal with them are the traumas that get stored in the body. Right? They aren't released. They're still there. It's as if you were traumatized. You just don't feel it anymore. And they're stored there with the hopes that at some point in your life you will gain the internal resources and strength and wisdom to come back to that area and liberate it. And we need to, because the amount of energy it takes to keep these traumatic energies suppressed is the energy. That's the same energy that is robbing you of realizing your dreams, full self-expression, creativity, all of it, right? Because that's the energy. I mean, the energy that builds a successful life is exactly the same energy that builds a failed life. It simply has to be released from the defensive posture, which is attached to failing, so that that same energy then, when it is released from the defensive posture, immediately moves into an expressive posture. And suddenly wonderful things start happening in your life. Because now they can. Because they can get in. There's nothing defending themselves against it. So, you already have, you say, how do I increase the willingness? You already have it. You wouldn't be asking this question if you didn't have the willingness. So the willingness isn't the problem. The problem is that you are believing these thoughts that are trying to keep you away from it. Now, without that thought, this is going to overwhelm me, or I have a strong resistance, and you just feel the resistance. And if you've got it right now, do it. If that sense of resistance is there right now, feel it. And just the act of feeling it is turning your attention towards it. First towards the resistance, then towards the pain. You can't get around the resistance, you have to go through it. So you first turn towards the feeling of resistance. Where is it? We're in the body. Now, if you're just with the feeling of resistance, noticing how the mind is constantly throwing a story about it, talk about it, well, we should, it's overwhelming, it's really going to hurt you. You can't stay here that long. If you just don't pay any attention to those thoughts and just focus on the feeling without those thoughts, suddenly the resistance doesn't feel so intense. It doesn't feel as absolute. And what you are doing when you do that, by the willingness to be there, is you are creating the opposite of the environment that engendered the trauma in the first place. The environment of danger created the environment. When you openly turn towards it, dropping the story and just being present with it, you're creating the environment of safety. That is what communicates. That is what gives the message to the nervous system, oh, something has changed. That will lower the resistance. And as that resistance lowers, stuff can come up. And it may not be pleasant. It may not be comfortable. It can be memories. It can be feelings in the body. Just stay with it. Just stay with it. Until, if you do really feel overwhelmed by it, just say, thank you, that's enough for now, and withdraw. Your nervous system will cooperate. It's been cooperating the whole time. Don't worry about it. You cannot hurt yourself. So, is that clear what the whole process is? That's the process of inner reconciliation, by the way. That's what I've called it. I have started recently in a few instances referring to it as soul reconciliation, because I think that's a nice phrase for it too. We're basically reconnecting to who we really are, but in order to do that, we have to get through all the layers of who we're not. And our resistance to those layers and our feelings about those layers, but little by little they just begin to fall away, because all we're doing is turning our attention back towards ourselves. When all the energy has been to push our attention away from our feelings, away from our pains, away from our experiences, away from our memories, get distracted. And God, do we live in a world that's full of distractions? Whoa. We're turning around. We're headed back in the other direction. We're going back the way we came. All the way back to that pure, pristine, originally innocent you that was there before any of this happened. Before any lifetime happened. The infinitely innocent you. So, how's that, John? And just got on. Never got an email regarding the same. I haven't been sending out the emails as much, and just changes in systems. Evan's kind of doing his own thing now, so I'm doing it all by myself. So Jane says, yes, it does. Thank you. Good. Now, if I miss anything, please tell me, because I like these. I do my best to make these answers complete, covering every aspect that I sense you need to have covered. October Paul, great name. What are the symptoms of enlightenment beyond karma samsara? I don't want to come back to this realm. One of the symptoms is you say you don't want to come back here. This is it, buddy. This is it. The human experience is enlightenment. This is it. The ordinary human being is the Buddha. That's right from the lips of the Buddha. The desire to not come back here means you've got some issues with what's going on here, which means you have resistance to your own life. In Zen, the highest koan is your life. It is the riddle to be solved. It is the huge mystery. Because here is the intersection of the absolute and the relative. The human being is the middle way. It is the place that is neither fully absolute nor fully relative. It is the intersection between heaven and earth, between the instinctual and the spiritual, the expansive, the spiritual. It is the intersection between God and man. Right? This is it. Right here, right now. So the symptoms of enlightenment they're really vast. I mean, the first symptom can simply be bumping into a book, and something inside says, read it. That can be the first symptom. It can be a painful experience that has a transformational shift in you. It can be just a feeling, a gnawing feeling that something's not right, and an impulse to turn your attention towards it to find out, well, what is this? That was Moses and the burning bush. That's what it symbolized. Moses' own inner turmoil, but it just wouldn't yield, right? That the burning bush was inside of him, as it is inside of every one of it, as is the crucifixion, as is all of the images, the religious symbols and metaphors. So those impulses, while they may seem very small, they may seem insignificant, they may not seem like, you know, the grandiose special effects of the enlightenment stories you've heard. Those are the real symptoms of enlightenment. That spectacular moment where suddenly, you know, you're filled with light, and I've had those, right? Those spectacular moments are few and far between, and they're not the substance of it. And most people that do have that get very attached to that. It becomes all about the bliss, and they end up seeking that. Done that too. So I'm not speaking theoretically here. I don't think there's a mistake out there that I haven't made. So if somebody finds a new one, you know, I'm probably in. Hopefully, I'm not making as many in a row anymore. So look very closely at your resistance to this moment. Enlightenment is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's not the way we suddenly get to this blissful place and don't have to deal with life. It's a famous book by Jack Kornfield called After Enlightenment, The Laundry. Because what happens is, enlightenment is everything gets seen differently. It's no longer just the laundry. It's life. It becomes the transcendent being made known in the field of time. So, because it's all your perception. If this moment looks like it's really drab and uninteresting, the problem isn't the moment. The problem is your perception, because this moment is God incarnate. It is the perfect moment. It is exactly the way things are supposed to be. And the seeing of that harmonizes you, reconciles you with your own experience. And what happens is, suddenly you see experience as the very face of God. The Sufi saying, wherever the eye lights, it sees the face of God. So now the ordinary everyday, right, is not ordinary every day anymore. The water gets turned into wine. High quality wine too, $100 bottles, right? Not, you know, not $2 chuck. So karma, samsara, nirvana, karma. Karma is simply that series of events that take place when we aren't awake to it. The moment we're awake to it, it's no longer a factor. We'll feel it. We'll still feel it. But you'll realize that the karma applies to this belief in a separate self, not to myself. And so now life can unfold just as it does, and it's not a problem for you. It isn't an issue. Now, samsara and nirvana. This is an interesting one. Nirvana does not mean the escape from the world. Samsara doesn't mean stuck in the world. Okay? If I see the world as objective, as something happening out there to me that has an independent existence and that can affect me, and I want to get out of it, I'm in samsara. The moment I see that what I call the world is simply a perception of reality, that I am completely in reality in this moment, that is nirvana. The focus of attention as the world, one is seen as a problem, the other is seen as the manifestation of reality. The seeing puts you in samsara or nirvana and nothing else. That's enlightenment. Enlightenment is the light gets turned on. It doesn't mean you're transported someplace. This isn't heaven. Nirvana is not heaven, right? Where I die and I go someplace out there, God knows where. Um, it's a secret. And then I start this life of, of perfect wonderment, right? It is a shift in perception that shows heaven on earth here. This is it. This is the Garden of Eden. It was our false dualistic perceptions that kicked us out of the garden, not the truth. And the double-edged sword of fire, right, that was guarding the tree of life, it's the tree of truth, is the sword of truth, which is what we're delivering right here. We are clearly distinguishing between that which is and that which isn't. It's the seeing, not the experience. So that is the symptom of enlightenment. Right? And you're in satsang because it's already happening for you. What you're experiencing right now is the symptoms of enlightenment. If you weren't experiencing any of those, you wouldn't be doing this on a Sunday afternoon. My God, there's football games, soccer, and, plenty of pubs are open, right? Right? There's plenty of stuff to do out there, that you wouldn't be doing this. But the only reason you're drawn to this is because it's already happened. Awakening is awakening to itself. It's not even you doing it. Your you awareness, the true witnessing, is awakening from the belief that it was October Paul. You fell asleep and dreamed you were October Paul walking around through your life, right? Having these problems and all these kinds of things, and saying, wait a minute, I'm not this. I'm sound asleep, happy as a clam in my bed. That's who you really are. Not this character that you've identified with. The character you've identified with wants to get out of this. Yes, because it's suffering. But you get out of it by seeing that the suffering goes with the character. You're not the guy in the dream doesn't wake up. The one sleeping wakes up from that dream. And then that guy in the dream, what happens? Poof, disappears. Mooji says it beautifully. He says, the one who starts the inquiry does not finish the inquiry, but is finished by the inquiry. How's that, October? We're going to call you Paul. Is that clear? Look down and see if he's said anything yet. Okay. Good. So let me know. If there's more for that, I'll do it. It's important because, believe me, you're not alone on this. You are not alone on this. This is the big misunderstanding, that there's some kind of a magic key that opens the door to some escape hatch, and it isn't. You just put it up there. Oh, come on back. So enlightenment is a recognition and not a mystical experience. Yes, it's that simple. It's that ordinary. When a young monk who had a big mystical experience, a huge awakening, asked the Zen master, said, the master had certified that he indeed had a Satori experience. He said, now tell me, reveal to me the deepest, most esoteric secrets of Zen. To which the Zen master replied, the jelly donut. The ordinary. It's true that those kinds of shifts in the perception can create an incredible array of colors and dancing girls and a mystical experience of a grade A, but it will fade. So I'm enlightened, but didn't know I was because I was hoping for fireworks. Yes, Enlightenment is your actual natural state. If you start from that point of view and start simply dismissing all thoughts that aren't enlightened and all feelings, not suppressing them, embracing them, but no longer identifying with them, it's a quicker route to to Buddhahood than striving to achieve enlightenment. You can't achieve it. You can't achieve what you already are. You can only recognize it. Love you so much, GP. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, October. It's, yes, and many people think that it's, look, if any experience, however intense and beautiful and magnificent, if it doesn't last, it's not it. Because enlightenment is not an experience. It is that which is having experiences. It is knowing yourself as the knowing and not as the known. Does that clarify it? You're shifting the sense of identity from any experience, however painful or pleasurable. And of course, that mystical experience is the most pleasurable of all, and people do it all the time. That's what plant medicines give you, those kinds of mystical experiences, and they can be very useful. They can be very transformative, but they are temporary. They're not the final word. As is, out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences and all of that, because they are an experience. That which is having the experience is absolutely silent, sitting in the background. It's so unmoving and unchanging and quiet, we don't even notice it. We walk right by it. Because it's ordinary. It's what's having the experience right now. We're going, what's the big deal? You're the big deal. Wonderful. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Nazarene, greetings from Dublin. Greetings to you, sir. So good to have you. SS, seeing this effortless being, just life doing it all, the person has no control. It's beautiful, but sometimes feels scary that it's all happening with no control. Well, it has control. It's just not you. Oh, look around. Do you really see anything out of control in the universe? There's human beings, which are a very unique form of consciousness, especially at this particular time, where we're seeing the incredible, where we're seeing consciousness kind of jettisoning the samsara, the material connect, the idea that I am nothing but a form. And so we're seeing the tumultuous things that happen as a result of that. That's what the book of Revelation is actually talking about, right? So if you want to go beyond the fear that comes up of being out of control, you have to go beyond the person who thinks they had control in the first place. Control is an illusion that we hold on to make us feel safe. And it feels very threatening when we have to let go of it. But you don't have to let go of it. You let go of the one who's holding on to it. Do you see the difference? If we identify with someone who needs control or could lose control, then I'm going to be afraid, because then I'm going to think things are out of control. But if I identify with the ultimate knowing, the ultimate self, the ultimate being, I realize that I have absolute control. None of it's personal, but I don't have to exercise any control. Everything is under control, because everything is the manifestation and reflection of the one indivisible, which means internally harmonious and consistent self. So nothing could ever be out of control. Michael Brown made a beautiful statement. He said that with enlightenment, you realize that you have the power to say to the mountain, "Be removed and cast in the sea." He says, you also realize that the mountain is just fine where it is. It's in the perfect place. We only want to control things because we don't think things are perfect. But they are, right? And the one who doesn't think they are perfect, that is the one I want to bring your attention to. That's the dream guy. That's the guy acting out a story in their head. And in their head, life can be difficult. The world is not really benevolent. It's kind of big and cold and vast. It could squash me in a minute. I'm not important. That's a picture of the universe. Right? And me in it. Now, if I reverse that role and I see, wait a minute, I'm not in the universe. The universe is in me. And I am the universal soul, not the personal soul. Then the question of control or no control simply vanishes. There's nothing to be controlled and nothing needing to be controlled. It's kind of like, I always use the example of jazz musicians because the whole art form of jazz, and why it is so amazing, is that it's predominantly improvisational. Sometimes totally improvisational. Right? So you wouldn't call a jazz player, a brilliant jazz player, out of control. Nor would you try to grab control because he does not know what note is going to come next. Right? This is life. Life is jazz, okay? it is not strictly classical with that very unhappy lady that gave you lessons when you were little. It's not that. No, that's not right. Smack your hand. It's not that. This is jazz. The more our sense of self is liberated, that is, the more it identifies with the universal self and less with the personal self, the more every moment becomes a dance. You are basically, life is the dancing, and you're the dance. There's nothing but this dancing. There's nothing to control. There's no need to, because everything is unfolding with the most remarkable precision and beauty. But this is something you grasp first. Get it with your heads, because you can wrap your heads around it, right? But this sense of needing control, the sense of a personal self, isn't just in our minds. It's in our emotions. It's in our bodies. And so little by little, this whole thing has to sink in so that we begin to feel the sense of not needing control, feel the sense of the benevolent unfoldment of life. No matter what it looks like to the senses, that is, no matter what the circumstance is, emotionally and mentally, you no longer interpret them as being, oh, this is a problem. It's simply, oh, an unexpected event, like the jazz player, that note that came out of nowhere. I used to do a lot of improvisation. I was not as, I wasn't a world-class improviser, but that was kind of it. All of a sudden a note came, you played it, it's too late to unplay it, so you work off that note. Boom, that's what happens. That's what happens next. In improvisational theater, the number one rule, I can't remember the name of the guy who developed the particular style of it. Theater sports is what it was called. I did a little of that, which was really fun and quite entertaining. But the number one rule was, when you're doing a scene with somebody and improvising, you never say no. Somebody says something to you, you never go, no, you accept it as true and you riff on it. You go with it. The moment you say no, you stop the energy. How often are we saying no to life? That's what the desire for control is, a saying no to life. Right? Like, you know better. But believe me, you don't. And isn't, on one hand, we want this control, but on the other hand, don't we want surprise? Don't we want astonishment? Don't we want to have something absolutely wonderful just pop out of nowhere? I mean, isn't that what we're all seeking? I mean, isn't really that's what it's about? Isn't that the celebration of life? My God, we don't all want to do the same thing every day. People get bored of their jobs. Why? Because it's the same thing every day. That's the culture we have have created, which is great for commerce and the like. It's great for, but it's not great for human beings. Our economic system is completely anti-human. So I think I've pretty much beaten that dead horse. Do you is that good there, Mr. SS? Let's see if he says anything down the line. Yeah. Okay. Good. Reparin Esser, Namaste from Turkey. I quit watching Satsang for a year now, and I realized that divine part of me I was aware of before has started disappearing. What to do? Well, you came back to Satsang. That's one thing, which is good. You recognize the place where we're consciously nurturing that. The divine part of me. When the divine part of you becomes the divine all of you, you will not have to worry about it disappearing. Notice that there was an awareness, a knowing of the divine part of you, right? There was a knowing of it disappearing. That knowing is the divine part. That's you. The apparent divine parts. And when we say the divine parts, what we're really meaning are the parts we like better. The parts that are more spiritual, they're more benevolent. They are better. Right? They're not as selfish. They're not as stupid. They don't do as many dumb things. They're more calm. They're more resourceful. They're more engaged in life, right? Yeah. So yes, they are a preference. But the problem is we see them as they have not been rooted in the real you. You see them as a part of you that comes and goes, rather than the perfume of that which doesn't come and go. What doesn't come and go? Whatever it was that saw and recognized divine parts, watched them disappear. Wasn't that the same awareness, the same knowing, the same experiencing? That's you, isn't it? Wasn't that you? Was that somebody else who knows the divine parts and told you about it? No, that's you. That's why it's so subtle, but it's so obvious, right? It's not fireworks. It's not Hollywood special effects. It's not Avatar. Right? It's this thing that's there all the time. It's what lets us see the extraordinary experiences or the horrible experiences. Right? It is our capacity to cognize. And notice, it never changes. It never intrudes on it. It never says, oh, no, not that. Even the, oh, no, not that, is perceived by it. It's completely open and spacious. It has no issues with anything. That's why it's also referred to as the great heart. It is the great open, loving heart of eternity. So, you don't have a divine part. You are the divine knowing. That is the self. Yourself, the self. The knowingness is the self. The self of me, the self of you, the self of everybody else that is watching and who isn't watching. It's the self of this pillow, this picture behind me, the wall, the shirt. It is the self, the one and only self. So, its presence or absence isn't dependent on whether you're watching satsang or not. Much as I like having you here, especially from Turkey, which is great. Much as I love having you here, and I'd love to have you here regularly, I'd rather have you wake up and do the satsangs yourself. But there's no dependency whatsoever. You just got fooled. You, like everybody else, you began to think that certain quality of experience and feeling were the actual reality. They aren't. They're the perfume. But when they fade and something else appears, if you're not wise to the fact that it's what is perceiving that is the reality and not what is perceived, you're going to experience this roller coaster, this up and downness. And you don't need to. You don't need to. Put your attention on that which is having the experience, and just notice the thoughts about it. Oh, and it doesn't matter what thought you have about the awareness that's having the experience. They are appearing in the awareness. It is a constant. You can't get rid of it. Pesty, it's like flypaper. It won't go anywhere. Because if it goes somewhere, you cease to exist. In that instance, you don't exist. And I don't mean you're just aware of nothing. There's no awareness. It's oblivion. It's nothing. Even the experience of nothing that we go through every night in dreamless sleep, there's consciousness there perceiving nothing. It likes it too, by the way. That's why that was a great sleep. And we invest in the best beds and stuff. Why? Because that place where you aren't there anymore. The dreamer's not there. Experience isn't there. Time's not there. Space isn't there. Nothing is there. It's just you. The infinite quiet. Refreshed. And then a world arises again. Great. Fine. All part of the realm of experience. Does that help you, Raparin? Nazrin, gee, should I work on questioning the fundamental belief that I am a small egoic self? Or should I also question the everyday stressful thoughts? What's the balance? Well, you can challenge all day long the idea of that I'm not the small egoic self, but unless you know who you are, it's not going to have much teeth in it. Who are you? Now, as I've been saying with Nazarene, which I know you've been listening, I'm sorry, with Raparin, the small egoic self is being perceived, is it not? You can describe it, can't you? It's subtle, but you can describe it, can't you? Right? There are clear attributes to it. It can be kind of petty, it can be fearful, it can be selfish, it can be self-aggrandizing, right? It can also be trying to be good, it can be, moral, it can be truthful, right? It could be all of those characteristics, right? They're all characteristics, aren't they? They're visible, perceivable attributes. So the ego is not a thing. Remember I was talking in the beginning? There's no things. We think of ourselves as a thing. Think of the wind as a thing. There's no things. The ego is not a thing. The ego is simply a particular collection of thoughts, feelings, and sensations, all associated with the thought I. Believing that the thought I is those things, that I projected on what is just a bunch of stuff happening, a bunch of thoughts, feelings, and perceptions and sensations, the I projected on that gives the illusion that there's a thing called an ego. But notice, all of it is being perceived by something. All of it. It's not there all the time. Your ego isn't there all the time. This thing we call an ego isn't consistent. It isn't continuous. If you've ever been really engaged in a movie, right, or making love, or maybe a sunset or some vista, on a mountain, and you're suddenly just completely taken over. The ego's not there. It's gone. There's no discursive thought going on. That sense of I is gone. It's pure experiencing. You're still there, right? So overcoming the ego simply means seeing it for what it is, a bunch of thoughts that we have identified with. Now, it isn't just thoughts, it's thoughts, feelings, and sensations. So even when your mind becomes clear about it, and you're clearly seeing those thoughts, there'll still be feelings and reactive patterns that could be that are relate to that same sense of I. The separate self hides here. It hides in this area. It hides in the body, right? It hides in our perceptions, right? So, but no matter where it's hiding, right, it is being perceived. And when we see that the sense of entity, of selfness we give to it is a projection of that which actually is a self, meaning you, then you see that it isn't real. And the absence of that, now recognizing it's not real, empowers you to systematically catch yourself when you start following the thought of the egoic I. There's no I there. The I is the one perceiving, right? Not the one perceived. The I couldn't possibly be perceived, because, well, then what would be perceiving it? So since it's you that is perceiving it, the I, the true I, is the perceiver and not the perceived, the true self, not the egoic mind, the infinite mirror mind, not the egoic mind. Is that clear, the way to approach it? Don't take it up as a practice that somehow you have to expunge all of the belief in the ego. The one trying to expunge the ego is the ego. But now the ego has started to identify with an enlightened version of itself. That I'm spiritual now, right? So now I'm on the path to enlightenment. So I'm going to divest myself of all these things. That's the ego. The true self, pure awareness, God doesn't say, I've got to divest myself of all of this. There's nothing to divest. It's simply aware. It is simply knowing. Let the I that had been identified with the ego, with this collection of functions of thoughts, feelings, and sensations, let that same sense of I turn back and identify fully that which is perceiving the thoughts, the feelings, and the sensations. And your struggle with the ego will be over, because it has no authority or power. It cannot hold you. You're holding it simply by being unaware of where you are identified with it. But you can't just disidentify with it unless you have first identified with what is the real you. Otherwise, it's just the ego trying to create a different version of itself, which is it would do. And it's very happy to appropriate non-dual talk, spiritual talk, New Age talk, whatever, right? Crystal talk, whatever. It will appropriate anything as long as it sustains itself. There's nothing there. There is no ego. It is the ghost in the machine. There's no ego. There's only the functioning of the programmed, conditioned responses of the nervous system upon which a sense of self has been projected. So when you say the word I, unconsciously, you are referring to this collection of thoughts, feelings, and sensations, missing the point that you are not that, you are that which is perceiving them. Did I say that clear enough for you, Nazarene? Love you guys. My gosh, this is so wonderful. Let's see if I'm going to scroll down here a little bit, see if... okay, good. Okay. David Maloney. Hi, G. Someone once said, We are a thought in the mind of God. As I pondered this, I realized the obvious. God does not think. Thus we are something that does not exist, yet intelligence holds us. God does not think. It's a good step. I mean, a thought in the mind of God. That's actually A Course in Miracles teaches that idea, as does the New Thought churches, Christian Science, Unity, and Science of Mind. I think they call it religious science now. Yeah, Science of Mind. That's the metaphysical premise, that man is the image and likeness of God, is God thinking. Now, don't interpret that as personal thinking. Thinking more as God conscious is conscious, right? The only thing God can be conscious of is herself. Therefore, the image that this consciousness is holding of itself would be what we would call man and the universe. It's a great first step. And I was involved with with that for a while, and I always struggled with it, because I got that I saw the thing, the idea of an infinite consciousness pondering its own nature, and that the image then it produces would have to be manifest universe, and it isn't really thinking as in discursive thought like human beings do. It's spontaneous, more like the jazz player again. It's just like the sense of self that would inevitably emerge from the self. But I kept going, well, but then just an image, and an image isn't going to be a self-conscious sentient entity. And eventually it kind of worked my way back that, wait a minute, consciousness, this consciousness is that pondering its own nature. And so there's not God here and me as an image, I and as a thought in its mind. Everything that I experience is consciousness knowing itself, but I am that consciousness. As it says in the Bible, be still and know that I am God. The I am, the sense of I am, consciousness is God. Now, when you look at it from that point of view, look around. You, as pure consciousness, everything you experience, what you call your life and all the objects and everything, are images in the mind of God, right? God, you, the pure ultimate self, the one self. Not personally. I'm not saying that you, David Maloney, are God, right? David Maloney is an image in the mind of God, but you are God, not David, right? People accuse me of not believing in God. And I say, oh, sure I do. I don't believe in you, right? So I've been an atheist and I've been a theist. I'm neither, right? We're simply looking at the universe from our own experience. What experience do you have outside of consciousness? None. It's all you've ever known. Everything you experience. It's not something outside of consciousness. It's in consciousness. Consciousness, the content of consciousness, is your constant experience. Okay, then everything is being experienced by consciousness. Then this consciousness, which is experiencing everything, is the consciousness. It appears as if it's, localized in this particular form in this particular place, but that's just an appearance. It's not. It can't be. Consciousness cannot be confined to anything. It's formless. Therefore, although it appears to be localized here as me or localized there as you in different parts of the world and like, that's only the appearance. Like you could take a handful of water out of the ocean and look at it. It's still the ocean, right? And eventually it returns there. So it could look like it's partitioned, but it's not. We build this room I'm sitting in here right now, right? It isn't actually dividing space. It's dividing my experience of space. We got go out the door into the closet or downstairs or something like that, right? But it doesn't actually divide space. Space is indivisible. Consciousness is indivisible. So that sense of it is a great step, and it can get you very far. But it also will hold you. And most of the people in the New Thought churches are stuck there because that's the thing, that step. But there's still two. There's still two, and they're even somewhat affected by the traditional Christian view, and the Jewish view, and the Islamic view as well, that to become one is blasphemy. God is unique. God is the ultimate other, and that our life, that religious practice is one of relationship, not of union or yoga. And it has still very subtly infected that particular way of thinking. So that's kind of the perspective it's looked at. So that God, the infinite, all-loving, all-powerful, divine mind, and all of that, and then man is his idea, so the reflection of it. So I'm just like it. But that would make two, right? That would mean that this consciousness here is a reflection of that consciousness. You can still see that the separation is there. There's no separation. The consciousness that is hearing my words right now is the consciousness. In religious terms, they call it God. The everyday word we use for it is I. Does that help you there, David? Meryl. Oh, I love you, Meryl. Hi from Australia. Daniel Burr. This is a funny kind of thought. Excuse me, I need some water. 72 minutes. I need some water. It actually gets a little bit warm in here sometimes. All right, time to shift position. Okay. There's a funny kind of thought that has been coming. The thought of after this life that manifestation experiencing won't happen again. It would just be great to experience again. Have you ever known a time when experiencing stopped? You know, for periods of time every night, you have an experience of timelessness. Right? Deep sleep. Deep sleep is there's no information is getting to consciousness whatsoever. There's nothing. Timeless, spaceless, completely empty. You wake up, it feels like that. It's been 5 hours, right? Or 8 hours, or 2 hours, whatever. Right? It could be 200 years. It could be 2,000 years. 2 million years. Right? It's timeless. Right? Timeless, meaning there are no years. There's nothing to measure time. We can't conceive of this, okay? Because we try to imagine time in timeless in terms of time. Oh, timeless means a lot of time. I mean, you can't say 2 million years because there's nothing marking time. It's 2 million years. It's a second. Right? So, just look at your life. Your life is an experience. Is it going to stop? No. Does consciousness ever become unconscious? And if it's conscious of itself, which means manifestation is constantly happening. Look at the universe. The universe is consciousness pondering its own nature. Not like the thinker, right? Just pondering and loving. I should throw that in there. Loving, adoring its own nature. Immersed in this perfect, blissful peace of full knowing. So not to worry. More experiences to come, right? Death will be an experience. The falling away of this body will be an experience. Oh, and you'll notice it, and you'll see it, and you'll experience whatever happens then, right? With and if we die before we die, if we awake before we die, it simply becomes yet another experience. No sense of loss, no sense of missing. People I love, they're still with you. Nothing's ever been lost. Who's lived still lives. Every form still has its place, because none of them are now tied to being someone. Therefore, all form becomes infinite. This constant transformation of the one form, which is God known, which is awareness, awaring. Awaring of awaring. What else can it be aware of? Awareness awares of itself. All experience is the knowing of experience. Do you have an experience without knowing? It's like saying, can you have an experience without experiencing? Right? So it is awareness out of which experience is made. This pillow is not something I am aware of. This pillow is awareness. It is consciousness. It is made of consciousness. It is not separate from consciousness. There's nothing other than consciousness. Look around, it's consciousness. It's not a subject-object relationship anymore, because consciousness is one. So there's not me and then what I am conscious of, as if it were separate. It has no separate existence. So the substance out of which all experience is made is consciousness. The known and the knowing are the same. Its existence is, it doesn't, all there is to it is the knowing of it. This is the, your mind will freak out about this one, because it is totally non-dual. There are not two there. The mind cannot go there. It just can't go there, because it needs two to define anything. It needs something else to define it against, something to refer to. This is not two. Knowing and known are the same. This is the knowing. So your human life is the knowing of the self. Does that answer it for you, Daniel? Can you die in peace now? John, great. This is clear. That's clear. Great. So enlightenment, got that one before. So I'm enlightened, didn't know it, got that. October Paul, I get it now. I love you so much, GP. Good, good, good. Ducks, my friend Ducks, how you doing? Hey, GP. Is it pointless to conceptualize timelessness? I mean, I can feel it, but not understand it. Ah, very good. Well, yes, if you think you're going to come to a definitive final term of understanding timelessness conceptually, yeah, it's a waste of time. No pun intended. Yeah, that really wasn't intended. That was good, wasn't it? Only to the degree that it yields metaphors and stories and parables and the like to begin to illustrate it and explain it to others. So I conceptualize it in those ways. You know, like I just said, million years, 1 second, what's the difference, right? To the timeless, because neither of those apply. And yes, the mind can't go there because there's not two, right? You'd say, yeah, well, how long did it last? Well, it has to have a reference point. If there is no reference point, the question how long does it last is meaningless. It doesn't. You could either say it never was or it always was. And you'd be right in both cases, because the reality is transcendent of all categorizations. It's transcendent of all opposites. So there's, when it gets to that point, conceptualization falls apart. It cannot go there, right? Now, having good intellectual equipment is very valuable, especially for explaining it to others, especially for helping clarify your own thought and discriminating, and also for teaching. So it has its uses, but those uses are only pointers. And so it's not like understanding this means you have some kind of grasp, intellectual grasp. The understanding is you know you can't understand it. You feel it. You surrender to it. You accept it. That's why when Socrates said, I'm the wisest man in the world because I know nothing, that's what he was talking about. This middle, this place in the middle where nothing can be known. Right? Because there isn't a duality there to know it. Something known by our intellectual standards, by human knowledge standards, is a description of one thing in terms of another. It is objective knowledge, which requires the subject and object. If there is no subject and object, and there's only oneness, it can't be known. It is unknowable. That's the transcendent. That's timelessness. That's spacelessness. It's even beyond eternity or infinity, which are just really big space and really lots of time. Timeless cannot be conceived. But simultaneously, you can see it. You cannot conceive it, but you can perceive it. What we're talking about right now is timeless. The truths that are being discussed here are timeless. They will always be true. No matter where you are, no matter when you are, it will be true. When I see the beauty of a flower, I breathe in eternity. I see the timeless. The timeless reflected in the field of time. The transcendent embodied in the field of time. That's what happens when you see a beautiful sunset, or a baby laughing, right? Or something of beauty that just grabs your attention, and it's the power of wow, right? It's just like, everything stops. That's timeless. That's everything stops. That's the moment you've stepped out of time. The time part of it, you might say, is that it changes, constantly changes, right? But the transcendent, timeless part of it is that no matter what it changes into, it's still breathtaking. It is still indescribable. It's when I just kind of fall into silence. So when you hear beauty, when you see beauty in any of the arts or in anything that anyone does, whether it's artistic in nature or more technical or more functional, when you see it done in a certain way, you're breathing in the timeless. You're sitting in the presence of God. Because the mistake we make is putting a duality between the absolute and the relative. As a friend was doing earlier with samsara and nirvana, wanting to get out, I'm unifying them. The transcendent, timeless, and time, and the momentary, the universal and the personal, are one. You cannot have one without the other. They're not two. So we're not getting rid of time to get into the timeless, we're getting rid of the idea that they are two. And so timeless and the time are one, two faces of exactly the same transcendent mystery. That which makes this moment wonderful, beautiful, elegant, inspiring, what makes it that way is the invisible, mysterious, primordial essence of it, which cannot be seen, except as the form which gives it expression. So the transcendent quality in a piece of music, and I'm sure we've all heard pieces of music, like Beethoven's Ninth or the Appassionata or the Moonlight Sonata. The beauty of it is just almost tears your heart out. Now, what is that beauty? Is it in the note? No. Is it in the piano? Is it in the fingers of the artist? It's in all of it. There's something there that is animating that moment, but is not confined to that moment. It is clearly seen there. It is alive. It is embodied. It is the Word made flesh in that moment, but it's not in the moment. It's not confined to it. It's not stuck there. This is the big mistake that religion makes in thinking that their version of God is the final term. They have limited God. They've taken God and put him in a box. And then God becomes Jesus, and now it goes from being this transcendent experience of experiencing the infinite mystery of life, which you are, to a bunch of worn out, oppressive rules and laws that lead to battles and fights. I mean, it goes from the most beautiful to the most stupid. Only simply by thinking that the form is the final word rather than transparent to the transcendency. You are transparent to the transcendency. Your life is God living. You're not separate from this mystery of life. You're not the creator of it. You didn't do it, right? You're not even the co-creator of it, right? We can put that aside. I'll talk in those terms for certain groups of people. For this group, I don't. There's no such thing. There's no creator. There's no someone create. There's only creating. There's only the explosion, the big bang of infinitely creative release of energy, the orgasm of the universe, which is constant. It's not a momentary thing. The Big Bang didn't happen once. It is happening now. It is a metaphor for the explosion of the creative expression of the transcendent in every single moment, in every single person. Every person you meet, every face you see is the face of God. Oh, I wish I could just tear your heads open and pour this in. Okay, how's that, ducks? October Paul. I lost you. What should I do now? Should I teach or facilitate inner reconciliation? Or should I just be the expression of self that this incarnation, that the personality should be? I'm no longer afraid. Yay. There's only one thing happening here, and there's no me. I get it now. Good. Right. So it's not a choice. Am I going to teach and facilitate inner reconciliation? Am I going to just be the expression? Both simultaneously. Because just being the expression, there's the awareness of the essence, the transcendent emptiness that you are, and its unity with the expression of it and how it takes shape. In this moment, it's taking the shape of satsang, me and you, and this conversation, this meeting of loving friends, right? Another time it can take form as teaching, facilitating inner reconciliation. You can, or meditation, or how to, you know. I had to learn how to clean gunk, hardened gunk off of a glass top stove, which I did. I spent 2 hours yesterday doing that, cleaning glass. So that was what God was doing in that moment. So it's not something you need to even say. What should I do now? Follow that I. What is that I referring to? You'll find in that case the question, what should I do, is the sense of the egoic mind. Right? There's no I doing anything. There's only doing happening. And so there's nobody there to do anything. Right? Now, I don't want you to go off in the absolute on that. The one who appears to be doing is in fact just done. That's part of the doing. Right? There's no doer, there's only doing, right? Happening is probably a better word, but there's clearly I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, right? That kind of thing. And on a conventional level, it's fine to speak like that, but on the deeper level, we recognize that every thought I'm having, I didn't create. Every impulse to move, I didn't create. Every motivation, every act, everything. Follow every thought, feeling, sensation, gesture, and perception to its root, and you will not find yourself there as the creator of it. Only the witnessing of it. And that witnessing is the self, witnessing its own nature, which is your life. Oh, I want to just bring it all together. Okay. Reparin, experiencing is me. Yes, stable, doesn't change. But bothers me to forget my connection with life and disappear in ordinary issues. You can't avoid it. Buddha couldn't avoid it, right? There's a time, right? There's a time when you need to give attention. Look, right now, I'm focused on these questions, right? And when I get the question, my attention is on the question. I want to give that question all of my attention. Now, it's wonderful that I get to talk about that which is holding the attention while I'm giving it the attention. But when I was cleaning that stove, I was not lost in my being. I was in the stove. I was the stove cleaner in that moment, right? I cleaned all the it was a day. It was a day for cleaning. I got the kitchen, so I did the kitchen, and I did a bang up job on it. Right. I spent the last couple of days working on videos. The last video for the video series I did on energy healing. I wrote some new music and the like. When I'm doing that, I am 100% there, right? But then I'll come out of it. I go, oh yes, remember my. It's not a problem because you are the self. So the fact that in a moment you forget the self doesn't change the fact that you are self. So there's no danger. Nothing's lost. This is the focusing of attention of the self. So you're the self focused. You're the self unfocused, right? And isn't when the connection with life, as you put it, disappears, isn't that not being viewed? Is not the awareness of it there all the time? That's you. That's never gone. You're simply becoming aware of that on such a level that you don't have to think about it. Just like you don't have to think about forming your words, right? You don't have to think about, how do I move my hand to scratch my face, right? Little kids do. Watching my granddaughter grow up, I remember when she, this is actually a hand now, right? That sense of me and other has begun to emerge, I and you, right? And so now she can do stuff, but she could still be kind of clumsy, right? Right? So but right now we do it without thinking. I don't have to think about it. It's part of the deal. So don't be concerned. You haven't lost your connection with life. You can't. You are life, right? You can't lose connection with what you are. But momentarily, you have to focus your attention. Sometimes you can do things and you can have undivided attention where you're aware of yourself and what you're doing simultaneously. Sometimes you're totally into it. When I used to design very complex computer systems, I had to be totally in it because they were so complex and so many permutations and so many timelines, different things, permutations that would fan out over time, that I could not give one cycle of attention to anything else, or I couldn't have come up with the solution. So I completely was lost in the complexity of it until the solution began to happen. When it did, now the tool kind of tied it together, gave me a context, and now suddenly there were some cycles left over for some other things. But during none of that time did I actually lose the connection of life. In that moment, it was life manifesting itself as creative focus. Right? So don't think of yourself ever as being disconnected from who you are. That's not possible. And I point you to the fact that the experiencing is always the same, to make you realize, oh, even if I'm not aware of it, it's still happening. Right? Even if I seem completely and totally distracted off in another place, I'm still experiencing being distracted off in another place. Wow, I'm never not that. That begins to sink into down to here, into the heart, into the emotional system. So you don't have to maintain it on the mind. When you learn to ride a bike, your head's there, right? You're trying to keep keeping yourself focused, but eventually the body learns it, and you don't have to think about it anymore. It continues to sink lower and lower into the system until it completely permeates everything. So does that help you, Reverend? Catherine, life is jazz, yeah. Lots of joy tonight in Satsang. My heart's singing. Wonderful. Catherine, thank you. Delgado. Hi, GP. I heard over and over again that the true self is whole. God, there goes my throat. Is whole and complete, but in my experience, sometimes it's really hard to feel this. Could you provide some pointers to help me understand and truly feel this completeness? Thank you. Well, first off, let go of the idea that you're supposed to feel it all the time, right? The truth of your being is not a feeling. It is the background against which feelings appear, right? So the feelings are going to come and go, right? Sometimes you're going to feel totally whole and complete. Sometimes you're going to feel like, a pile of mush, an old stale moldy bowl of oatmeal, right? It's okay, right? When that feeling comes up, you're simply conscious of it. And this is where the attention just goes back to. Right? So the feeling comes up. Oh, it's a great feeling. Of course, we prefer great feelings, right? We kind of gravitate towards the good feelings. So we think, I'm having the good feelings. I'm feeling whole and complete. I'm connected, right? Then I feel incomplete and partial. I'm not connected. Not true. Don't buy that. The feelings are fine. Don't buy the belief that one means I'm connected, the other means I'm not. You are always connected. You're always that which is aware of both the feelings. When the belief goes away, there'll be more of the feelings of being whole and complete and less of the incomplete, because this will have no more power. Right? So it'll become, it'll drop out of the place of being feeling into more of just this underlying conviction. It's just reality. It's just what is, without any questioning of it whatsoever. So that's the pointer. The pointer is noticing that it is the belief about the feelings that's the problem, and not the feelings. You don't need to feel good. Right? Believing that you do makes whenever you don't feel good, makes you think that, oh my God, I've lost it. It's not true. That's just the thought. You can't lose it. You cannot lose what you are. So I keep pointing you back to, are you experiencing? If you experience a happy thought or a horrible thought, great experience, horrible experience. Is the experiencing any different? No, that's you. That's where you root yourself. That's where you go and establish yourself there. Because now no belief can touch you that says a particular kind of experience has a particular kind of meaning about me. It doesn't. That's the belief. That's the story. That's the nonsense that we were all taught. And that's why we chase happy feelings and avoid bad feelings. Because we think those mean I'm whole and complete, and these mean I'm not. No, they're just feelings. That's it. And the less authority either have, right, the more it stabilizes into peace, into stillness. And there will be peaks, right? And they'll be great, but you won't hold on to them. And there will be valleys, but they won't be suffering. They'll just be the griefs of loss of the various kinds of things that happen in life. They won't create any suffering. You won't be attached to great feelings. You won't be averse to sad feelings. They won't affect you. There'll be a consistent joy. There'll be a contentment, which is the real Ananda of Sat Chit Ananda. Does that help you, Degado? Alessandra, hello from Monterey. Hello, Alessandra. So good to have you here. October Paul says, everything boils down to the state of absorbing information. It is the self understanding itself. Yes. Yes, you are absorbing into every fiber of you the truth of your being, which is coming right now in the form of information and words and insights and pointers. Right? And you are absorbing it. It's like a transmission. You are absorbing the meaning of it, the truth of it, which the words and the insights and the pointers are simply the conduit carrying the truth and the reality of it. The words carry the word, right? Which itself is invisible. So the words embody the reality and come to you as what you would call information. But that's like the radio, right? The radio isn't the information, it's the delivery of the information. The real information, the song, is embedded in the information. So on that score, I would say, yes, the self is understanding itself. Every time you say, aha, I get it, that is the self awakening to itself. It's not you, the person, or any person waking up. It is the self waking up to itself, and the person has just disappeared. You see the difference? It's subtle, but it's certainly not so arcane that it's beyond the reach of us normal human beings to grasp. It's subtle because we don't think about stuff. We don't really use our intellectual equipment that well, but it's not obscure. Michael Cervini, do you do this every Sunday? Yes, sir, I do. Every Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. 1 o'clock on the Pacific Coast where I am, and 4 o'clock, which is like 9 o'clock in London. Right? So yes, every Sunday. Every now and then I have to be away, so I'll usually make a video to put up. But you could find me. You can find me here every week. You know where to find me. Marius, Walsh. Why do you think hearing this won't work at first for people? There seems to be a process of letting hidden layers in the thoughts go. Otherwise, I'd have woke up now. Um, you know, believe me, I have thought about this. Every teacher, every genuine teacher of non duality wonders if there might be a magic bullet somewhere. I mean, Ramana Maharshi would just sit and say absolutely nothing for hours. You just sit in his presence. Um, and something definitely got transmitted in that. Um, legs falling asleep. Um, you want to say something like, well, it's when it's their time, but you know, the bottom line is I don't know. I just don't know. Um, but let's not try to generalize it. Let's just talk about you. Seems to be a process of letting go hidden layers in the thoughts. The first flaw I want to point out in what you're saying is that there seems to be a process of letting go of layers in the thoughts. The only reason you know there's a need to let go, that you're aware of the layers and that they're not true and they need to be let go of and they're kind of sticky and they keep getting you, they keep hooking you, is because you've already woken up. When you're asleep, those thoughts aren't questioned. They're you. They're your life. They're the truth. They're not questioned. Talk to lots of people. They're not here. They're not questioning the truth or falsity of their thoughts. They're not looking at it like that. Consciousness flowered. It opened, or you wouldn't even be able to ask that question. So that's the first thing, to recognize what's actually happening, that it is the awakening that is moving you to even look at your thoughts. So it doesn't happen as this big flash, which is the second part I want to make. Otherwise, I would have woken up right now. What do you think is going to happen at the awakening? See, people, they hear the great stories, right? Of these incredible events and mystical experiences, stuff. And, oh, I want that. Well, yeah, who doesn't, right? It's like, going on a roller coaster. It's fun, right? They're great fun experiences, but they're not the awakening, right? The awakening can precipitate something like that, but it won't last. It will be an experience and then fade. So the expectation that somehow awakening is first off supposed to happen absolutely instantaneously, and that's that's the end of it. From totally deluded to Buddha in a split second, not true. Never's happened that way, as far as I know. It has never happened that way, and that there's a letting, that the moment you realize that you are wanting to head in that direction, the awakening has happened. Now, when we look at it from the point of view of time, we see awakening unfolding as the development of someone maturing, nuance, deeper and deeper insights, until finally there's a definitive event of some kind, right? It can be very subtle and almost unnoticed, or it can be a big mystical experience. But that's perceiving awakening from the point of view of the person in time. To awakening, there's no time, no process has happened, nothing has unfolded, no development has taken place. The progressive path where people are trying to refine themselves and improve, Tibetan Buddhism, years and years of training and studying, and Vipassana, they talk, it's going to take a long time, right? Because it's a constant purification. That too is an expression of the awakening, because you wouldn't even be walking on that path if there wasn't some kind of an awakening that takes place. When you realize that, you'll look around and see the awakening is happening all over the place, right? While the world seems like it's on the verge of total collapse, it is, but it's collapsing into awakening, right? Which doesn't mean it's going to be, easy for the next several years, but we have a leg up knowing where it's headed, because this awakening is happening everywhere. You know, the New Thought churches that got started in the beginning of the 20th century, or, yeah, the end of the 19th century, actually, and actually started a bit of a movement, as well as all of kind of the more esoteric stuff that emerged, the joining of the East and West, the personal development movement, consciousness movement, this constant expansion is the awakening happening, the universal awakening taking place. And you are experiencing it personally as your interest in this, your desire for it, your questioning of it, your asking me questions. So let go of any idea of what it's supposed to be, and recognize it now. Look for it now. Oh my God, it is happening. I'm the recipient of it. It's nothing I'm doing. It's not on me. The only thing that could be asked is that I cooperate a little bit. Okay, I'll cooperate. Right? And then engage the wisdom that you've already acquired of looking at those thoughts, as you said, finding the hidden layers. Instead of, oh, I've got to get to the head of the river to get to this point, right? That makes right now simply a stepping stone to later, which is postponing the awakening. If you go, oh, I'm seeing right now this layer that I didn't see before. I'm awake to it. This is the awakening. As it moves more and more into me, it moves more and more into the world, it transforms me, it dissolves things in me, I'm seeing it reflected in the world all around me. It is happening. To us, to our sense, to the personal sense, in time, it is happening over time. Different people in different places with different kinds of experiences. Some extraordinary and mystical, some absolutely ordinary and mundane. So mundane, you wouldn't even know it's what? That's what, right? If you see it from the point of view of the transcendent, of the timeless, it is a flash. It is now. Awakening is now. It's always been now. You've never not been anything but awake. You are the awakeness, awakening to awakeness, right? That's all that's ever happened. And the appearance of it over time is simply how everything appears. Everything appears over time. My words are appearing. I'm speaking an eternal truth that is true now and forever, but it is taking form in words that are falling out over time, right? So the awakening has already happened. You're it. You're awake. Right? Now you simply you say, oh, now you begin to cherish this moment as an unfoldment and a manifestation of an awakening rather than as a path to awakening. You got that? You got that, dude? Sorry, Marius, I'm not sure you're a dude. You may be I don't know if that's a male or female name. It's a beautiful name. I just don't know which way it goes. David Rose, John Lennon said, death is just getting out of one car and getting into another. Amen. Oh, and hanging out in between for a bit if you like, right? Seeing what it's like to not be in the car. Ava, dear G, is it right to say consciousness pondering itself is consciousness becoming me in my world? And this is going on eternally, meaning not for some long time, but always now, and now? Yes! Perfect, Ava. Yes. I could not say it better myself. Consciousness pondering itself is consciousness becoming me and the world. It is the manifest universe that is one with the consciousness. Because you took the consciousness away, it's like shutting off the fountain. The water doesn't keep going, right? The fountain, the source, and the fountain are one. So they're a unified oneness. So consciousness pondering itself is the universe, right? It's me, it's you. This is consciousness pondering itself. This is going on eternally. It is not a moment. It happened here and creation took place. That's the historical model that makes a final term God. It is an ever-present happening that is happening now, and now, and now, and now, and now, and now. Yes, wonderful. Bo Snarsky. Hi, G from Canada. Is it something wrong with me? No. No, there's nothing wrong with you. Daniel says, yeah, it does what it just, there'll become another movie lifetime after this movie ends. Yes. Maybe be bigger, completely different. Right? The only thing that binds us to those ever-recurring lifetimes is the idea that I'm a separate self. And so I get another life appears, and now I'm identified with that. So now instead of identifying with GP, I identify with, Wanda Karstensen or something, right? 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 Oh, this is who I am, right? No, no, it's not. It's just one series of dreams after another. Yes, that's one thing after another. Not, but you don't have the sense of incarnating, right? You're not chained to it. But experience is, the nature of consciousness is to experience. Consciousnessing is experiencing, is knowing, which means there's always something to be known. Because the nature of consciousness is inexhaustible, illimitable, infinite potential. Never runs dry. Paul says, so everything is appearing on the screen and nothing can hurt the screen because the screen is the observer. Yes, this is great. And the screen is what's appearing on it. The screen and the movie is a nice metaphor. And prior to the development of computer screens, or LEDs, LCDs, it was all projection. Even the old TV sets were a tube where there'd be an electron gun that would shoot electrons at a material that is basically painted on the back end of the tube, which would glow, and that gave the picture. So it was always projection. The movie screen is a projected image. So the screen not being touched by the movie, there was still a sense of duality to it. The computer screen, on the other hand, is different. The screen is the movie. The screen is the collection of little LCDs or LEDs or whatever the particular technology is that light very quickly. They blink very quickly, 60 times a second basically, right? In order to keep the color that gives the illusion of the movie. So now the projection and the screen are not two. You are looking at the screen. You're looking at me right now. You are also looking at the screen. Now, I just brought your attention to it, and you say, yeah, you're right, I am looking at the screen. It's exactly the same when I bring your attention back to the one witnessing what's happening, to the witnessing it itself. I am bringing your attention off of what is being witnessed, the movie, and onto the screen. But it's not separate from it. In fact, when you realize that it is the screen, while you're enjoying the movie, you can also enjoy the incredible wonder and beauty and intelligence that made the screen, right? That the screen is, that it can create this, 4K, lifelike, incredibly beautiful, wondrous thing that, because of that, allows this to happen. Right? So that the metaphor becomes much better, right? So the screen is not separate from the image of the screen, and the image, you can take the image off, and you just have the blank screen, but the potential for every image is there. But when the image is there and you get involved in the movie and it's wonderful, maybe even completely forgetting about the screen, which you probably should because you really want to be into the movie. And then the movie ends and, oh, there's a screen there. But the screen's been there the entire time, hasn't it? It's never not been there. This is a better metaphor because consciousness and the manifestation of consciousness are not two. Thank you. This was beautiful. Says, you got our Black Wolf is. Justin, what's your name? How are you? Having a conversation. Suketa Patal. I'm sitting here with my feet up in heaven listening to all of this. All of the viewers' questions are so perfect. The answers, wow, blessings. Thank you, Suketa. And we're just about time here. Bo says, sorry, my previous message was sent to you without being finished. I know absolutely nothing and feel spangly, very okay with it. I'm not sure what spangly means, but I'm assuming that's cool. Am I too comfortable in my own silence, or is the ego playing games with me? I don't think you. I think that, resting by the still waters for a bit, right? You don't have to be vigilant, watching for the ego. Oh my God, if that was what spirituality was about, count me out, right? Your natural wisdom will indicate, will show it clearly, right? And your natural love of truth and curiosity about truth is what sustains the journey, right? If this is nothing but a discipline, you won't be able to keep it up, right? I've got to get to enlightenment. I've got to get to enlightenment. If I get the right word here, if I get the right thing, if I have that definitive aha, right? That makes this moment absolutely miserable. I want this moment right where you are, wherever you think you are on your journey, to be happy. So wherever you are is where you're supposed to be. It is a unique, individualized manifestation of the infinite awakened. Your life is the appearance of that. And it doesn't have to match mine. It doesn't have to match Muji. It doesn't have to match Ramana Maharshi. It doesn't have to match the Buddha or Christ. Matter of fact, it can't, because yours is the unique expression of awakening. Yours is the Buddha story. This is how consciousness is unfolding itself in its infinitude to itself. So right this moment is exactly where you're supposed to be. So the ego isn't a thing that can play games. There's no thing there that can play a game. It's just a collection of thoughts, feelings, and sensations. That's it. If you think it's a thing and it's playing games with you, it means when you find yourself engaged with it and off thinking of yourself as the egoic mind, you're going to have an issue with yourself and make an all-powerful ego. Nothing distracted you, right? The awakening unfolded itself. The very fact that you saw, oh my God, I've just identified with the ego, is the awakening. If you didn't awake, you wouldn't see it. You'd continue thinking, I'm that, and go about your life as the ego. The very fact you went, oh, got me. So you welcome it, because that is the symptoms of awakening. You see it. I see it. And the more you see it, the more you enjoy it, the more of it there is. And that's how we progress, for lack of a better word. That's how it unfolds itself. Awakening is not an event that happens. It's an eternal truth that unfolds itself over time. And because everything in time has to be expressed in terms of opposites, awakening knows itself as awakening by knowing delusion, darkness, sleep, ego. You couldn't have awakening without that. The eternal awakening has no opposites. It is the completely transcendent. We can't even speak of it. We just are it. Remember, folks, you can't know this, right? You just are it. You will forever be in the state of not knowing. It will forever be the mystery. Socrates said, I know nothing, right? You will know nothing for eternity. Be plenty of knowledge, relative knowledge, useful, conventional, creative, fun stuff, right? But the knowing of the truth will always be, I don't know, but I am. So even if in a moment you forget, you get distracted, it doesn't change. Of course not. You don't know. You are. So whether there's distraction or absolute focus, whether there's total awareness of my true being and wholeness, or I'm totally, completely lost in the sauce, the truth remains the truth. That's where you anchor yourself. Anne really needed this today. Woke up asking not to be here, feeling betrayed at awakening as ask and receive. Yes, that's the downside, Anne, of the law of attraction metaphysical stuff. There's a lot of good in it, but it isn't ask and receive. It's a dualistic nature. There's me and there's the universe, and if I do it right, the universe is going to give me what I want. So I must not be doing it right because I'm not getting what I want. This is it, Anne. This is it. The problem isn't a life you want to get rid of. It is a perception of life that isn't true. And that can be disposed of. And that is like a death. And the problems we face because of our attachment to the false perception, the problems are the crucifixion. That's what the crucifixion represents. And if we willingly enter into that as Christ did, they all fall away and we experience the resurrection, the birth to the spiritual life, eternal life, the intersection of, and the cross. Again, I love talking about this. It represents exactly what I'm talking about, the perfect middle way. The intersection between heaven and earth is the human being, the human heart, right? And it is also the intersection of the perfect middle way, the timelessness, the intersection between the past and the future, the timeless center. Here, our problems, the things we face, the challenges in life, are the crucifixion that put us right into the middle of the absolute cross of life, on the tree of life. And in the absolute center, we die to the flesh. That is, we die to the person, that sense of self, and we awaken or are resurrected to the eternal being that can never die. It's one of the most phenomenal and beautiful symbols in all religious history. And of course it appears in every culture there is in one form or another. Ava says, thank you for your answer and for this great satsang today. Much love. And thanks for the last workshop. So well. Del Henderson, so true. Oh, Del. Hey, man, how are you? So good to see you. David Rose says, thanks, GP, and namaste. All right. Questions have dwindled down. We're only about 10 minutes over my 2 hours. Well, it's not really. It's not really. It's not a hard and fast rule. I don't have any hard and fast rules. So that's why it's hard for me. I can't do a radio show because it's too strict, 56 and a half minutes. Can't do it. Thank you so much, GP, says Liza. Greatly appreciate these satsangs. Great. Inner Aesthetics. Hi, GP. Hey, Inner Aesthetics. Good to see you. So let's bring it to a close for today. Thank you all. What you said really described how I feel. I don't know, but I am. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. I'm amazing, brother, and thank you for your amazing message today. You're more than welcome, Del. More than welcome. Discovering who you are is the whole point of life. But it's not a mission, right? It's a joy. If it's not a joy, something's off. It means you've taken up spirituality as a practice that's going to get you some kind of goodies at the end of a long road. In which case, we need to take a step back and look at what's really motivating you towards the spiritual journey. So it stops being a practice or a goal or an ambition and becomes a moment of happiness now. So that the happiness is simply unfolding over time and not deferred till you get everything right, so you get happiness here. This moment, every tiny little insight is the awakening. That's it. Nothing grand, no special effects, no exploding kittens or some game I saw. No great epic Cecil B. DeMille event. This right here, right now. This is it. Thank you all. See you next week. Namaste.